They painted the words on the gate in block letters, "Welcome to the haunted house." And for the first time in years, I felt the kind of stupid, childish thrill I promised myself I had outgrown. That thrill was the hook, the dare I couldn't refuse, the excuse to drive out of the city and breathe the kind of cold air that smells like old newspapers and rain. I tell you this because I need you to know I went there on purpose. I wasn't lost. I wasn't being chased. I walked up the cracked path with my keys in my pocket and the light of my phone in my hand, and I still don't know whether that makes me braver or more foolish. The house sat staggered behind a tangle of dead hedges, its windows like blind eyes. Paint peeled from the frames in long strips. The wood smelled of rot and something sweet, sickly, half-fermented, that tightened the back of my throat. The porch sagged where the house had given up holding itself upright. A window on the second floor was cracked open, just enough for someone to look out. I saw a face there before I saw the door, pale, waxen, the eyes milky and tracked by dark veins. For a second, I thought it was a reflection, a trick of the glass in my imagination. Then the figure blinked. You expect your chest to react when you see something wrong, heart race, breath shallow. But what happened to me was smaller and stranger, a cold knot at the base of my skull, like the first slice of ice through warm water. I put my phone up to the pane, and the camera stuttered. The face, if it was a face, moved aside, as if whatever lived there had decided it didn't like being looked at so plainly. The window shut further, but not completely. From inside came a sound I can't name, half a rustle, half a throat clearing, like someone rearranging themselves in the dark. I told myself urban explorers always double down on risk. I told myself I was here to prove something to the kid I used to be, that fear could be measured and cataloged, that ghost stories were just bad lighting and grief painted well. I told myself these things as I pushed the front door. The lock was brittle and surrendered with a surrender that sounded like a sigh. The air that exhaled from the house after I opened the door was colder than the night outside, and it carried with it the exact smell of the window. Old sugar and wet leaves, the kind of smell that coats your tongue and refuses to go away. Inside, the foyer swallowed my light. My flashlight cut across wallpaper patterned with small, repeating eyes that seemed to stare when I moved my head. A grandfather clock stood against one wall. Its face was frozen at 3:17, the hands fused like two exhausted fingers. A hush lived in the house, but it wasn't empty. It was full of the tiny human things that rot leaves behind. The soft tap of drainage, the muffled thump of something settling in another room, the whisper of fabric rubbing against wood. Every sound felt as if it was balancing on the edge of doing something more deliberate. I started to take notes on my phone, date, time, the exact words painted on the gate, because I needed evidence to hold on to, a scaffolding for the story I was telling myself. At the top of the stairs, a pair of children's shoes sat side by side, caked in dust, the laces fashioned into a loose, patient knot. They faced the railing, as if someone had paused there and decided, for some reason, not to go on. My thumb smudged the dust as I reached for the banister. It came away on my skin like dry flour. Then the lights dimmed. Not all at once, more like someone was closing a heavy curtain very slowly around the house. The flashlight's beam thinned, colors flattened, and a pressure pooled under my ribs. I remember thinking, absurdly, of the face in the window and how small and human it looked then. An old man, maybe, or a tired woman, until I realized I couldn't remember any human detail beyond the eyes. My ears angled to the dark and found a sound that tightened everything. From somewhere behind me, only a breath away, a slow exhalation that matched my own. I turned. The hallway behind me was empty. The entryway door swung wider on its hinges as if someone else had pushed it gently. On the floor beneath the window where I'd seen the face, there was a smear on the sill, faint as a fingerprint, darker than the wood. My skin crawled. I stepped closer and the smell rose, metallic and familiar, in a way that made my stomach dip. Old blood, or the memory of it. I told myself to leave. I told myself to take the photos, to run the tape, to go home and laugh about it with friends. Instead, I went up the stairs. The house had already decided it would keep me. All I could do was walk where it pointed. I kept climbing because every sensible impulse screamed at me to run. The stairs were the kind that remember every footstep. boards that creaked with personal reproach, and with each step the house seemed to breathe harder, as if inhaling me in. At the landing, a narrow hallway stretched into a row of doors, each one slightly ajar like an accusing mouth. My flashlight jittered across pictures in frames. Family portraits whose subjects had been scratched away, their faces gouged into blank crescents. The worst part wasn't the absence of faces, it was how familiar the frames felt, as if they had once held faces I recognized. I paused at the open door nearest the end. The room was small, wallpaper peeled into ribbons. A rocking chair sat empty but warm. On the little table beside it, a Polaroid lay face up. I picked it up with hands that didn't belong to me. The photo was of the window, my window, and in the glass, a figure pressed close. Except the figure's head was turned the wrong way, as though someone had tried to wear it backward. Under the Polaroid, in blue ink, were two words I had not written but could have. "We're waiting." The house had started talking to me without voice. It spoke in objects, in the Polaroid, in the placement of shoes, in the way dust on a piano spelled a letter when my flashlight passed over it. I told myself these were signs, coincidence, pattern, my own mind stitching meaning where there was none. But then I heard my name. It was not a shout. It was a soft, patient roll of the syllables across the landing, the tone I use when I talk to myself when I can't sleep. I turned so fast my neck popped. The hallway was empty. The door at the far end swung a breath wider. The sound came again, closer this time, not echoing but intimate, as if someone had been studying the way I breathed for a long time. I followed the voice into a room that must have been a nursery once. Cradles, toys gone stiff with dust, a mobile that hung motionless, casting thin, moving shadows. On the floor, a circle of small chairs faced outward, like a congregation waiting for a sermon. In the center of that circle was my phone, screen cracked, camera off, playing a video on loop without sound. I recognized my jacket on the back of one of the chairs. It was the jacket I'd worn in the photo I take every Christmas, the one in which I'd posed with my family before everything broke. My stomach folded into itself. I pressed play. The video showed me walking up the path to the house, the exact way I had walked, and then the footage changed to angles I had not seen. It showed me inside, at the foot of the stairs, hands in pockets, looking up. It showed me placing my phone to the window. In the footage, I was smiling, patient, like someone who knows what they'll find and is eager to show it. At the end of the clip, the camera swung to the window, and the face I had seen there leaned close and whispered, and though the video had no sound, the shape of my lips matched the word I felt lifted against my chest: home. That should have made me run. Instead, I watched it twice, 3 times. The more I watched, the more the edges of the room blurred. The mobile began to turn, a tiny, deliberate rotation that didn't match any draft. My own breath fogged the air in front of me, though it was not cold enough for fog. I felt then a sense of being expected, like the household had been holding its breath and now it exhaled. I moved toward the window at the far side of the nursery because all roads in that house seemed to lead to glass. The frame was pitted with old nail holes. The pane was clouded with time. Someone had pressed the words "Don't look into the dew" on the inside, small letters made with a fingertip. My name sat beneath them, written twice, as if practice had been required. My skin tightened. I wiped a thumb over the letters and left a smear that matched the size of my own. Then the lights, such as they were, went out. Not a gentle dim this time, but a surgical cut. For a breathless second, the world fell to the black between heartbeats, and something moved inches from my face. A warm thing that smelled like my mother's perfume, like old sugar, like iron. I felt lips brush the shell of my ear and heard, without sound, the exact cadence of a voice I had heard only in my head for years. The lullaby my grandmother used to hum, the one that used to make me small and quiet. "You should come with us," the sensation said, mouthed against the cartilage. "It's nicer when everyone is together." I grabbed for the sill, and the glass was wet, like someone had been crying on the other side. I slammed my palm against it, and the house answered with a knock, 3 soft taps that matched the rhythm of my pulse. Behind the panes, shapes gathered, faces again, lined up like an audience. The eyes were not empty this time. They were bright with something hungry and patient. I can explain this, I thought. There is always an explanation. But the explanations were retreating into a fog. Memory feels dishonest in that house. It folds and unfolds like paper, revealing different handwriting each time. I discovered then that the scribbles on the walls were not random. They were names, one below another, dates beside them, and at the bottom of the list my own name, with today's date scrawled in a hand that had been practicing curves. When I turned to leave, the hallway had lengthened. The door I had come through was farther than it should be. The landing was a degree steeper. The grandfather clock downstairs had to be a joke. Its hands had moved, slowly, to 3:18. I felt the house tightening around me like a fist, and in the dark, from somewhere behind the row of faces at the window, came a whisper shaped like an invitation and a threat at once. "We have been waiting for you to finish the sentence." My throat closed. I wanted to finish that sentence with, "I should have left." But the house would not let me say it. It wanted me to say something else. When the house lengthened the hallway, it did so with the polite cruelty of something that had practiced patience for decades. The door I had entered through slid away as if on a stage, out of sight, polite applause in the dark, and the walls leaned closer. My phone, which had been my anchor, now showed a black screen with the faint, sickly clock digits of 3:18. The battery icon blinked once and died. For a second, I stood very still and listened to my own blood. It sounded like someone knocking politely and insistently at a door I couldn't open. I tried the window again. The faces were there, shoulder to shoulder, their palms splayed against the glass as if trying to memorize its texture. When I looked close, I saw details that shouldn't have been. A child's freckle that matched the birthmark on my left hip, an old man's scar that mirrored a scar on my own knuckle. They held other people's features like borrowed garments. One face, a woman with too long eyelashes, tilted her head and smiled in a way that felt intimate and devastating. Her lips moved, precise and slow. The house had taught them patience. It had taught them to wait until the syllables that would let them in were ripe. I walked backward, palms splayed along the wallpaper that had once been eyes and now felt like skin. Names crawled beneath my fingertips, shallow grooves where some other hand had carved history. The list ended with my name in cramped, overeager script and the date beside it, today. Ink that looked like dried tea. Someone had been keeping a ledger of arrivals. Something pressed at my back then, light as a child's hand. I did not turn. My muscles refused argument. Memory, if you can call it that, unspooled in thin strips. I saw a picnic by a lake, the same jacket hung over a branch. I saw my grandmother humming that lullaby into my ear as a dark shape watched from beyond the reeds. I smelled the perfume again, and with the perfume came a flood of details that weren't mine and yet fit too well. The curve of a lip I had seen in a Polaroid, the way a particular laugh folded a face into itself. The house had a way of stitching you into its family album. "Finish the sentence," they whispered, a chorus like pages turning in unison. I had rehearsed the sentence all the way here. I should have left. When I forced my mouth to form it, the words came out wrong, as if someone else were duct taping my mouth and pressing their own syllables into the mold. The sound that emerged was not my voice, but a layered choir, each syllable a dozen voices, warm and small. Instead of "I should have left," what came out of me was two words I had not meant to say. They fell into the room like seeds. "Make room." The effect was immediate. The air shivered. The faces at the window leaned forward, and their eyes, once milky, once blank, grew suddenly bright and satisfied. The mobile in the nursery spun faster, tiny toys blurring into a slow, deliberate storm. The chairs shifted, as if a breeze moved through them, although the house had been still only moments before. Something cold and wet threaded around my wrist like a piece of string. I glanced down and saw a small hand, no older than 6, clutching me as if it had always done this. Panic is terrible at measurement. It is a quick thing. It flares and then burns out. This panic, though, was patient. It stretched and reorganized itself into compliance. Hands, too many hands, found my shoulders, my waist, the back of my knees. They did not pull, they rearranged. A thumb smudged the side of my mouth and left dust there that tasted like old blood. I felt my jaw unhook with a gentle mechanical sound, and something, inspected the interior like a jeweler checking a clasp. There was a mirror on the wall now, one I hadn't noticed before. I should have been relieved to see my own outline in the glass, my own eyes wide and frantic. But the face in the mirror was layered, a palimpsest. My cheekbones were there, and so were others. My hairline blended into the hairline of the woman from the window, into the child's cowlick. When my hand rose to touch the glass, the fingers that met it were not mine. They were colder, and the print they left faded into the same thin circle the house used for visitors. Home, they mouthed around me, and the word was as soft as the cradle's sway. The lullaby hummed, richer now, every voice in the house in harmonic agreement. It pressed against my ribs until I could no longer find an argument. Resisting felt like pulling a thread from a tapestry and watching the pattern give way with every inch. I tried to scream, sound lodged in my throat like a coin. I tried to move toward the door, and the hallway rearranged itself into another room I had already been in. The house folded me, then unfolded me into smaller, manageable pieces. My wrist registered numbers like a watch stolen in childhood. My name was being inked somewhere, just out of sight. The faces at the window began to clap, not loud, but in slow, deliberate applause, as if the end of a long performance had finally arrived. Their movements synchronized with the tuning fork in my head. One by one they turned, raising their palms to me like gifts. A pressure built in my ears as if the house were sealing a lid. There is a terror that comes not from the idea of dying, but from the idea of being remembered incorrectly forever. I thought of my mother's hands, the particular way she folded a letter. I thought of the last time I told a lie that felt like a prayer. These memories were stripped and repinned to the house's own memory and then offered back to me like proofs. When they asked me to finish the sentence again, the voices were patient and kind. I could have said any number of things. I should have left. I'm sorry. Don't take me. Instead, the syllables that the house had arranged for me fell cleanly from my lips, both as if rehearsed 1,000 times. Make room. Glass sighed. The window opened from the inside, not like an exit, but like an invitation. A space cleared on the sill, polished and ready. Behind the faces, a darker face watched with eyes that were old as a ledger. It leaned forward, and with a tenderness that broke something in me, pressed its forehead to mine. If you had asked me then what fear tastes like, I might have said metal and old sugar. In the last moment, I tasted my own name being written in someone else's hand, the ink warm as a pulse. I stepped through now sometimes in my head, walking back to the door, meaning to test memory, to prove that this was illusion. The ledger sits on a shelf where the clock used to be. My name is there, neat and final, and beneath it, in a cramped, certain hand, someone has added a line. Welcome, it says. Make room. I can still feel the sill under my knees. The house is hungry in a way that feels like belonging. They keep my teeth on a thread in the upstairs room, where the wallpaper eyes blink when no one's watching. Welcome home.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.